Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over how to use the simple selectors for Unity style sheets. So let's just dive right in. I'll start by creating a style sheet by going to create UI Toolkit style sheet. I'll just name this my styles, and I'll create a UI document by going to create UI Toolkit UI document. And I'll just call this one my document. I'll open my document in UI Builder. Now to apply our style sheets to our UI document, just go to the top left, add existing USS, and I'll choose my styles. Now if we preview the UXML document now, it'll show that no style sheet has been applied to it. So in order to make it update, you have to save this. And what it'll do is it'll automatically populate the code for any changes in the style sheet, as well as the UI document for when you've done any alterations in UI Builder. If we go back to UXML, you can see that this applied the style sheet my styles to this UXML document. Go back in the UI Builder. Now if you preview the my styles USS, you'll see it'll just show visual element as well as an open and close curly brace. Go back to UI Builder. So to add a new selector, we'll just go to the top left box here. If you click in it, it'll have this nice help box here, which will go over some of the simple selectors. I'll just type out, for example, the ones which we're going to do today. One has already been put in, which is visual element. I'll do another one, which I'll just call this one red box. And another one, which I'll call my elements. And the last one is just an asterisk symbol, which is a wildcard. So the four simple selectors we have today is the top one, which is a C# type selector. The second one, which is a USS class style selector. Third one is an assign name property selector. And the last one is a wildcard selector. So we'll look at this in the USS. Now that'll only populate the code after we save it. So I'll go back and save. Okay. So you can tell that they all have a syntax of selector, and then the open and close curly brace. Now for the C# type selector, it is just the name of the C# class, which derives from visual element, and you just have to type it without any kind of special prefix. So just type it out in verbatim. And the top one is just visual element. The second one, we need to prefix with the dot operator. And you can see that I'm using the kebab case convention for both the USS style class selector as well as the assigned name property selector. So this third one is the assigned name property selector, and you prefix that one with the hash symbol. And the last one is the wildcard selector, where all you have to type is just the asterisk. Now let's just head back in the UI Builder. So first I'm going to demonstrate the C# type selector. So as you noticed, our top selector is just called visual element, which will just basically affect any visual element in our hierarchy. So let's just fiddle around with some things. We'll just give this a black background, I guess. Now you can see that even though we have nothing in our hierarchy at the moment, our UI has just gone black. And the reason for that is that each UXML document has a a root visual element. And this root visual element is also being affected by our visual element selector. And not only that, if I drag like a progress bar and a drop down box into hierarchy, you can see that these two have also been adversely affected. Because if we actually look into the hierarchy of progress bar, you'll see that it's actually constructed of several visual element class objects, which are also being affected by our visual element selector, which is just painting all of these visual elements to have a black background. Now, that might not seem too bad, but then if we do something where we globally affected a visual element size, let's say 300, 300, you can see how things just suddenly go really pear-shaped. So I'll revert the styles applied by going to size and unsettle. Similarly, if I use the wildcard selector and I start updating things in here, let's just make everything red this time, I guess. That has more of a global reach because the wildcard is actually affecting any type. So everything in here, like if we check out this label, that is being affected by the wildcard. Everything within the hierarchy of drop-down field is now also being affected by the wildcard selector. So I'll undo all of these. So a general rule of thumb is just to not use the wildcard selector or a C# type selector named visual element by itself because it's just going to affect a whole lot of things. There can actually be useful uses for using the wildcard selector as well as having a C# type selector of visual element, but that's only when you use complex selectors, which allows for more specificity. I'll clear out this hierarchy. And this time I'll just drag in something simple like a button. And instead of having visual element as the selector, we'll rename this one to just button. And now if I just change the background color to green, it appears okay because in the hierarchy, button is only one visual element type. And if you're using the C# type selector just by itself, it's only going to affect the parent object. So if I delete this and I add in a toggle instead, and I rename this to affect toggles, you can see that the toggle, only the parent is being affected by a toggle, whereas its child elements are not being affected. So I'll delete this. I'll make this an easy to see example. We'll just call this one label. And I'll drag label in. And this time we'll just change the label so it's, we'll unset the color, but I'll give it a border width of 2, or black, and change the size. And I'll change the text. So again, we're using the C# type selector just to affect label. And you can see if I just drag in more labels, they'll just follow the same style rules. And it makes it much more safer to use the C# type selector by itself on custom elements which don't consist of child elements. So we'll save this and we'll look at the preview of the USS styles. And you can see our label has been updated with all our style rules. And the syntax to make it work is the name of the style attribute, a colon, which works as an assignment operator, a value, which in this case is 2 pixels, and then a semicolon, which marks the end of the expression. So let's go back into UI Builder. Okay, so I'm just going to clear up the hierarchy again. So next we have the USS class selector, which is this one here, which we called red box, and it's prefixed with a dot operator. Now this selector only affects elements which have been assigned to that class, which in this case is the class of redbox. So to demonstrate this, I'll just drag in a visual element, and this one I'll just change the size, be 200, 200, and we'll make it red. So to assign our redbox style to visual element, we can do it by dragging redbox onto visual element. And to remove the style, we can just click on the cross button next to redbox. Alternatively, we can also apply the redbox style to the visual element by putting it in the input field here. Oops, make sure you spell it correctly. Actually, you don't even need to add the dot operator. It should just automatically detect that you're using a USS class style. And I'll just unassign it here. And another way you can assign the red box style to the visual element is to the UXML directly. So I'll just save this. We'll go look at the UXML. And in our visual element here, you can just type in class equals and put in red box. And notice that you don't have to put the dot operator in here when we're manipulating the UXML itself. I'll save this and we go back to UI Builder, and voila, it's been applied again. Okay, and I'll unassign it again. And another way to assign the USS class selector to an element is through code. And to demonstrate this, I'll just create a custom element quickly through custom visual elements generator, which is an editor tool I've created. So I'll add an attribute of string type with the name of text, and the default I'll just call label. And I'll just save it as my label. So script is being created. And I'll just open this up. So you can see that the string attribute text is being created and the rest of the boilerplate code in order to make the custom element work. So I'll just add a label to this. And I'll create a constructor. And I'll just make it that our text attribute sets the text for the label. So back in UI Builder, I'll just delete this from the hierarchy and I'll add in my label. And you can see already that my label is already being affected by the label C# type selector. So if we go into label here, you'll see that it's affected by our label selector. Now, I'm just going to delete this label selector because what we want to do is affect this label part here, my label, by a red box. And you'll find that you can't just drag a USS class selector onto a grayed out element. It's only going to be able to be dragged onto the parent at the top here. So we have to do this through code. So back in our code, I'll just put in here and label dot add to class list. We just call red box, and notice you don't have to put the dot operator at the start here either. So if I save this, now you can see it's affected by red box. But we'll just change it so it doesn't actually look like that. And we'll just make this back to what we have for the other label. Border width 2. And there you go. So now red box is affecting this label, even though red box isn't a suitable name anymore. We can just rename it here. We'll just call it we'll go back into my label and I'll just change this to plain label. And you can see that the plain label has now updated this label here. So this custom element my label is basically just a wrapper class for the label class. And I can just change the text in here. So if you like the time-saving benefit that this custom visual elements editor tool provides, or if you just like to support the channel, I'll leave a link to the description below to the asset store where you can find it. And finally, the last simple selector we'll be going over is the assign name property selector. So I'll clear out this hierarchy by deleting my label, and I'll delete plain label and the wildcard selector. This selector works by only affecting elements which have a corresponding name assigned to it. So if I drag a visual element into the hierarchy and I rename it to my element, we can directly affect the style of my element by the selector. We'll just give this like a big magenta border, I guess. The name of the element can be assigned by right-clicking in the hierarchy and renaming. It can also be done up in the right side on the inspector panel here. So if I just delete that, you can see it's unapplied to style, but I put it back in, it's been reapplied. And notice that you don't actually have to put the hash symbol at the front here either. However, you do have to be careful about the name maybe not being unique within the hierarchy. So if I drag in a label here and child it to that, and then I also name this my label or my element, you can see that it's also been affected. And if I name this button my element, or if I actually spell it correctly, there we go. So you can see unintended situations can occur if you have not considered the possibility that the name of an element might not be unique. Now I'm just going to clear out the hierarchy for this next demonstration. So I'm just going to drag a radio button into the hierarchy, and you'll notice that if you right click, you can't actually rename any of these grayed out child elements. However, Unity has named one to Unity checkmark. So if we actually rename this to, I'll just unset the style here. Unity checkmark. We can directly affect the style of this grayed out element with the assigned name property selector. So I'll just change this so the background color of the check mark is green. So when we preview this and we check on it, it'll come up as green. Using the assign name property selector to affect child elements of a custom element is probably one of the most useful uses I have found for that selector. I'll just do another demonstration of this affecting custom elements. I'll just get rid of this. And this time I'll just rename this to my custom label. And I'll go back into the my label class. And this time I'll just, instead of adding this to the class list, I'm just going to change the name of mLabel to my custom label. Save this. I'll go back to my builder. Now this time when I drag in my label, it's applied my custom labels stuff to it. I'll just make this a bit more stylized. So order 2, oops. And put the size back up. Change text black. So I can just bring in more of these. And you can see that my custom label has been named within the code to affect the label. And the my custom label selector it's affecting that object. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video on USS Simple Selectors. In the next video, I'll be talking about how to use complex selectors. So I hope to see you there, but for now, peace out.